does he do? He might go all the way. He gives it a ride. It's a chance. It'll be a goal. Beauty, buddy. Wants to be rolling through. He can. Come at the moment. Come at the champion.
The SCG used to be one of the AFL's great fortresses. When the Swans were at their best in the premiership years, 4 points was guaranteed. Today and now, the Swans struggle to not only win, but kick a score that can win at the SCG. We've had our chances, but we're never going to win if we're kicking 9 goals in a game. You are listening to the Swans Blog SwansCast, the number one Sydney Swans fans podcast. In this week's episode, we review the Swans' second round loss to the Crows. We talk about the midfield woes, the lack of defensive depth, the SCG shackles, and give you our Monday champions and villains. I'm Justin Mitchell, and with me is SwansCast regular Josh. Josh, it was not the result that we hoped for. Certainly not the performance either.
No, it certainly wasn't. I actually managed to get to that game. I was on my way back from northern New South Wales, and I thought, oh, here we go. They'll turn it on. We won't go, 4 wins from 13 games at the SCG, but anyway, that happened.
Yes. Now, I couldn't believe it myself until I went back and had a look at the scores. In the first 2 rounds of this season, we have kicked 1-2 in the first quarter. That's not even near good enough.
No, it's not even close, is it? It's not competitive. It doesn't take control of the game early on, and it certainly lets the other team, as we've seen the last fortnight, really stamp their foot on the game by quarter time.
Exactly. Now look straight into it. So top of the agenda is that the Swans' SCG home form is worrying. It's kind of almost getting to the point where it's becoming scandalous. If you go back to 2017, obviously the first 6 games of the season, we can write them off. But after that, we only lost 1 more game, and that was the round 10 match against Hawthorn. We only lost that by 6 points. It was Roughhead who kicked the winning goal with about a minute left.
Yeah, he broke our hearts that night.
He broke our hearts. But since then, in that season, we just went the flogging on every single team that turned up. I mean, we're talking 100-point win against Fremantle in round 21, a 80-point win against Carlton in round 23, a 65-point win against Essendon in the elimination final. Our average score for at that ground in that season was absolutely phenomenal. Our average score differential was over 50 points per game. So we were scoring more than 50 points than our opposition every single game. And then you fast forward, starting 2018 to now, we actually have a minus score differential. We're actually conceding more than we're scoring. And our last 3 or 4 games, we haven't even passed 70 rather. So our last 100-point score at the SCG, and we're not even just talking a win, but our last just 100-point score was round 8 or 9 last year. So that's
and
terrible.
who was that against?
That was against Fremantle.
That's right, it was too.
And since then, we've struggled. Our average score has been around about the 60 mark. We've actually scored under 60 a handful of times as well. So it has not been pretty viewing for us, and it has not been enjoyable either.
No, it's been very ugly, and I think some of us are probably surprised at how poorly we've done since the bye last season. But I don't think anybody who's really paid attention to the way players are trending, not just in our team but amongst other teams, probably saw the midfield dominance fall off that we've seen for the Swannies over the last season and a half. So it's not that much of a surprise, but it doesn't make it hurt any less.
Yeah, exactly. And some of the stats, I was a bit shocked when I actually read them myself. But we've actually dropped off 38.5 points less than 2017. That scores 4, while we're conceding almost 15 points extra per game. That is a phenomenal change. We're now only averaging about 16 points more in that same time, points for and points against. So it is quite astounding, the change and the fact that we're just not scoring at the SCG anymore. We're actually not scoring anywhere anymore.
No, and we haven't been scoring for some time either. I guess the question is that, where do you put it down to and how do you get it back again? Because as you said, in 2017, we were running at nearly 150% as far as scores go after that 06 start.
Yep.
And a lot of those players are still out there, but we're just not getting it done.
I do have a talking points article that we put up on the blog today, which is probably worth reading. I actually cover a lot of these points. So the first point, obviously, is that our one-pace midfield is short on numbers if you look at the midfield itself, you got Josh Kennedy, who was absolutely phenomenal on the weekend. That was probably one of the best games I've seen him play ever. His stats were off the chart. 36 disposals, over 500 metres gained, 16 contested possessions, 13 score involvements, 2 goal assists and 8 clearances, and a handful of tackles. And to be honest, he probably had 8 to 10% of our tackles for the match too.
Yeah, I can't remember what the numbers. Well, that is pretty poor. And that's not to say that he didn't lay enough, because he did more than his fair share of that. But certainly he wasn't getting much help from the rest of the team.
Exactly.
But us only having one midfielder who's actually on the ball is a frequently recurring occurrence for us. It's been a problem for some time. This week, obviously, the skipper. The skipper was doing all the hard work for us. But who is it going to be next week?
And we're waiting for Luke Parker to pick up. But I think Luke Parker's copping a really heavy tag at the moment. And you can look at it, the fact that Dan Hanbury's gone, Tom Mitchell's gone, Kieran Jack's on his way out. He probably shouldn't play anymore. So those players were getting tagged and tagged very heavily. Now it's Luke Parker who's copping that tag and Josh Kennedy who's getting the number 1 tagger again. George Hewitt had a really bad match. One of the worst players. Even his AFL fantasy points were like one of the worst players on the ground.
No, that's right. And it was pretty obvious at some stage they decided that he wasn't worth trying to, play as a run-with role or as a tagger on Sloan or, the Crouch brothers or any of those guys. And that was just, borne out by the fact you look up and he's down in the back line. You're thinking, why is George Hewitt in the back line? And the answer is because he's not cutting it in the midfield. Yeah.
Luke Parker was probably one of the key instigators in the second quarter along with Tom Papley to get us back into the match.
Yep.
The Crouch brothers, Jenkins was massive in the second half. The AFL player ratings had him as the best player on the ground, and I think he had like a career best second half. Rory Sloan was really good. Tex Walker was pretty good. Seedsman was serviceable. Atkins was good. McKay was okay. Lynch was good. And you have to look quite a fair way down to see any decent players from Sydney, and there really weren't that many.
No, there really weren't that many. And we sort of talked about this the other day about, who should form the core of our midfield, because it was always Kennedy, Parker, Hanbury. Hannah's obviously isn't there anymore. We're not really sure what's going on with Parker, because he's sort of become this sort of semi-forward, sometimes midfielder, and Kieran Jack just isn't there at all at the moment. So who do you put in there? There needs to be, and we sort of discussed this, whether we need 3 stable guys there, and I think we said it would be Parker, Heaney, and Kennedy, and then you have a supporting cast that roll in and out. Someone who's, quite quick with their feet, but don't necessarily have to be good kicks, but they have to be able to break the centre square open, and we've got none of that at the moment. It's very
slow, very one-paced. Yeah. So obviously on the weekend we had Tom Papley, who's more of a small forward than a midfielder, but even then he was probably our best clearance winner for the match. Ryan Clark, who has copped an absolute lashing from all quarters. I hate to say it, but I mean, it was kind of deserved. His game was abysmal, and he actually played quite a lot of the game too. He played about 75% of the game, had 9 disposals and 2 turnovers. So that was really poor. He spent time in the midfield, had 0 impact. Heaney spent barely any time in the midfield, had 0 impact. Mills, I don't think even went into midfield, had 0 impact. So I think our 4 main midfielders, they have to be Kennedy, Parker, Heaney and Mills. There's no other combination that's probably as good as that we've got.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't see the point either in pushing. I know one of the reasons that Isaac spent a bit of time forward compared to what he did last week was supposedly he had a minor ankle injury, and that was part of his management during the game, was to play him forward rather than run him as an on-baller. But I don't see the point in stacking out our forward line at the moment if we can't deliver a usable ball or even win it around the contest. So it's kind of, I know it's a robbing Peter to pay Paul situation, but gee whiz, you could have Kappa, Plugger and Franklin and God knows who else down there. But if the ball goes in there 50 times a game and it's garbage delivery, it doesn't matter who's there. You need to win it in the middle. No.
And we can talk about changes a bit later on, because we did actually put a question to our listeners, and it's what changes would you make ahead of the Carlton game? And there is actually a fairly large consensus among the changes that they would make that I suppose aren't really that surprising when you think about it. But there are several clear changes that have to be made. And there's some players that are playing at the moment that look like they just haven't played in a year. And their contribution is literally at that level. So it's quite unfortunate. But we'll get into that a bit later on. Let's get straight into our Monday champions and villains. So, Joshua, could you please give me your Monday champion?
My Monday champion is, I'm going to get hate mail for this, is the Hawthorn Football Club.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I'm going to get hate mail for this. Look, I don't think anybody really knows what the circumstances surrounding the Tom Scully trade was during the off season. They obviously picked him up for half a packet of twisties and a warm bottle of Coke, but the story supposedly was that his foot injury was so bad that there was a chance that he would never play again. And now here we are in round 2, and Scully played, and he had a pretty average game, but he did play. So my hero is the Hawthorn Football Club for getting in a guy whose career was supposedly over, fixing him, and putting him back on the field. And I'd just like to say, too, that if the medicos at Hawthorn, while they're working miracles, could come up with a cure for cancer, that'd be great.
Well, actually, one thing they could do that's possibly better is if they could come up and work for the Swans.
I think we just need to have medicos, don't we? Do we actually have one? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I think it's Dr. Nick Riviera. I think that's our doctor at the moment.
Hi, everybody.
1-800-DOCTOR. The B is for budget.
Yes, that's right.
Right, so I have a champion. And my Monday champion is Brisbane. Hands down, the Brisbane Lions. They are an exciting team to watch at the moment, and I have enjoyed every single minute I've watched them. I've not enjoyed much of the Swans football this season, unfortunately, and I love the Swans, but damn, it is good to see Brisbane play good again. The AFL needs them, Queensland needs them, and they are ripping it up, and they have made some really good trades and recruiting decisions. They are going to be a very good team the next couple of years.
Yes, they are, and you would hope that they can put themselves into finals.
Yes,
next year or the year after. But you'd have to say that if their trajectory keeps going, that they might be a sneaky chance to make the 8 this year.
I reckon it's worth penciling them into the 8. I think they're there already. It's whether or not they can win around, the first round of finals. They're playing really good football, and I think there's more to come. But you look at some of the choices they've made. Charlie Cameron, excellent pickup. He was the exact player they needed in the forward line. Mitch Robinson was the player they needed in the midfield when they had no one. And he's been there for a few years now, and he has been an absolute rock. They traded out Dane Beams, and they got Lachie Neale. They so upgraded on that. It is unbelievable how much that has worked out for him. And he was
You would have to
amazing.
wonder. You would have to wonder what Freo were thinking with letting Neale go for what they let him go for. Like it clearly showed this weekend that Freo still needed Lachie Neale. And it also showed just how good Lachie Neale is and how badly underrated he was because he played for Freo. The guy is a dead set star.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just really enjoying Brisbane at the moment. We joke about football at times. I know we have our little in-jokes, but every single time Brisbane play well, I'm like, I should start up the lionsblog.com. But look, I have a villain, and I think this one's a pretty obvious one. It's got to be everyone's villain, and not just from our game, from quite a few games. It's the AFL, the Rules Committee, and the umpiring department. The Sicily free kick on the weekend is a prime example of WTF. You had the Zach Jones tummy tap free kick. You had the McVeigh 50-metre penalty when he was tackled without the ball, and Heaney slotted the goal.
That was absolute garbage, that was. I'm still angry.
And the worst of them
garbage.
all is that ridiculous 50-metre rule change. There was nothing wrong with it to begin with. But now, like you saw, I don't know if you watched the North Melbourne-Brisbane game, but Brisbane gave away a 50-metre penalty, and Ben Brown's picked up the ball. The Brisbane player's running with the umpire with his back turned to the player, and Ben Brown's just sprinted up to the player, stuck his arms out, trying to appeal for another 50-metre penalty. And the player had his back turned to him. He didn't even know he's there.
Yep. I mean, good effort from Krusty the Clown there to milk another one, but I mean that's clearly not what they were trying to intend here. And
no.
And that sort of stuff all the time has been a recurring thing though. So you've got Lindsay Thomas doing his I run backwards at you, grab your arm, I wrap it around my neck, and the umpire was stupid enough to call that high contact and just that kind of garbage. So you shouldn't get rewarded for seeking it out like that. It's nonsense, and you would think that our officials would know better.
Well, the thing is, the players are doing it at the moment. Look, Colin O'Riordan, he was in the wrong. He shouldn't have held him up. But in his defence, the umpire was only 10 metres in front of the players. He sprinted to the umpire. We don't even know where the mark is. So for all anyone knows, he's just going to sprint on. Okay, that's in the rules. That's fair enough. They can play on. They should be able to play on when it's 50 metres, right?
Yep.
But you've got to know where the 50-metre penalty ends. And I think that's the
right.
most important thing at the moment is no one actually knows where it is. And I think because of that grey area, it's being exploited. So
yeah, absolutely.
My immediate recommendation or wish would be just ditch that interpretation. Just go back to the old 50-metre rule. Just nick it off. You know, it's tried, it's done. It didn't work. It's failed. And it's got a lot of people upset. So just get rid of it.
And just on that vein, I'm going to tack a small villain on the end of your speech. And that is that how the AFL has announced that they're going to introduce technology midway through the season to deal with this. You know, is it a goal? Isn't a goal? Did it touch the post?
Yeah.
It's like, let's just do it properly. You know, why are they going to change that stuff mid-season? I just think that's garbage. It's just garbage.
No, the AFL, they do things half-assed. That's their mantra. That's their motto.
Certainly do.
Josh, you have a villain? I'd love to hear it.
It's the Giants. And not
Yes.
because they lost.
Damn.
It's the Giants because the Giants, for whatever reason,
Are villains.
are villains because they traded Tom Scully for half a packet of Twisties and a warm bottle of Coke.
Round 2
On
is
the
back
assumption,
on. Yep.
as we understand, that's right. On the assumption his foot injury was possibly career-ending and then he would never play again. So either their salary cap was so screwed up they had to unload him for absolutely nothing, or they didn't understand the severity of his injury. So GWS, you are the villain for giving him up for nothing.
Have to be both. There was salary cap pressure. There was no doubt that there was, and it was widely reported at the time. But as you said earlier, there was such talk that he might even have to retire. That's how bad the ankle injury was. So I think Hawthorn's done the right thing. They've got him in for nothing. They're probably paying him nothing, and they've got him back on the field already in the second round of football, and that's pretty impressive.
Yep. I just thought that GWS should have probably put more time and effort into assessing what that injury was, because the fact that he's been turned around, he's back on the field in round 2. Like, it's not like it's after the bye or it's 3 or 4 months further down the track. It's round
Sam
2,
Naismith.
and he's back on the park.
Yep.
Well, did you say Sam Naismith?
Yes, I did.
That's a nice pun. I like that.
Look, straight into the weekend review. We're going to do things in a backwards order because we need to look at the positives before the negatives, and there's only a couple of positives, really. So, AFLCA votes came in today. Josh Kennedy got the 10. Predictable as always, and he was absolutely amazing. Dane Rampy and Lance Franklin, they got 1 each, so both coaches gave him a vote. My money would be on Longmire giving Rampy 1, and I can't remember who it is from Adelaide giving Franklin 1 for his 3 goals.
Yes, I don't know. They're from the other side of the country somewhere.
That doesn't matter. But best on, the best I had is Kennedy, Franklin, Parker, Aaliyah, Papley, and Rampy.
Yep.
I know people have sort of thought other things. And on this, so one very new thing we've done on the website, we've actually had some really good engagement, and I encourage anyone who listens to this podcast to go to the website when we post our player ratings, which we do on the day of the match or the morning after. You now have the opportunity to put in your own player ratings. So on the left, in the red, is our player ratings. On the right, in the blue, is our fans' player ratings. So when you put in your player ratings, it'll go into what the fan pool has already created, and you'll see our ratings and the fans' ratings. So we're quite excited about it, and a lot of people have already done it, and we've got good feedback. So please get in there and put in your own player ratings. Joshua, have you put in your player ratings?
I did, and mine were not that dissimilar from what the original set were. However, I did notice that that the average in the blue column for a lot of the players was, for a couple of them, was quite a bit more or less than what the original ones were. So I reckon anyone out there who puts in, just say we rate someone as a 5 and you go, no, you've got it wrong, they're a 2 or they're actually a 10 and you guys don't know what the frig you're talking about. Put a little comment underneath and tell us why, and if it's interesting, well then we might put it up on the show. Yep,
and certainly get in and put your own player ratings. Now we gave Kennedy a 10, for example, and everyone else has given him about an 8.5. We gave Ryan Clark a 1, and almost everyone's also given him a 1. So we know that we're not that far off, and people generally agree with us. So it's an exciting new thing, and people love it. So get in there and do it. We want to get as many people as we can so that we know whether or not we're accurate, and we get good feedback from you guys about it. But anyway, so the positives, obviously, we scored more than 60 points. We didn't lose by that much, and we're pretty close in the second and third quarter. Some abominable umpiring decisions really killed our momentum, and we did have an opportunity there to kind of push on and potentially, I don't know, win, but certainly make it a lot closer than it was.
Yeah, I thought that despite the fact that we played like a bunch of busted crabs for the first quarter, I thought they were competitive though for the next two, and considering what we came off last week, competition was the first thing you can ask for. You don't worry about your disposal efficiency and all that garbage if you're not competitive. And I thought they were really having a crack. But I'll tell you what, once the green maggots got involved in it and started blowing the pee out of the whistle, you could feel the energy get sucked clean out of the SCG, especially when they reversed that goal to Heaney. You could feel it go when the players dropped their heads and their shoulders, and it never really looks like we were back in it after that. So maybe we could have pulled out an upset, and part of that would have been the Crows, shoddy accuracy in front of goal. But gee, I'd like to have that last quarter and a half back again with some reasonably unbiased officiating.
Well, the thing is, after we had that missed goal and then the 50-metre penalty, the Crows just marched up the other end and kicked 2 goals in just over a minute. Tom Lynch kicked a goal on the run, and then Eddie Betts kicked a goal, and that was literally the end of the match. You could see after Eddie Betts' goal that was it. I think I don't like calling matches, but I could tell at that point it was just like, no, the Swans can't win this. Their head's already down.
No, that's right, and I think I may have sent you a message towards the end of the third quarter saying that the body language of our guys off the ball had noticeably changed just towards the end there, and I think part of it was, we just can't get it right. We can't get it right, and they can't get it right, and it's just all not going our way. And it looked pretty flat from that point on, but at least it was marginally better than last week.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting sort of topic to talk about when you consider Friday against the previous week. Being the previous week, we actually were really close in it in the last quarter. It was really just the Dogs who kicked away in the last quarter. I would say our first round performance was better than the second round, but there are people who say the second round was better than the first round. Let's have a look at some of the stats. We'll just go quarter by quarter, because it's quite... every quarter quite different, to the point where it's head-scratching, really, the difference. But we were negative 20 disposals, negative 5 inside 50s, negative 4% disposal efficiency, minus 8 free kicks, minus 2 clearances, and minus 15 contested possessions at quarter time alone. We turned that around in the second quarter. We actually had 8 more inside 50s, so we're up by 3 inside 50s, where we're still getting slaughtered on the free kicks. I think it was 10-2 at half time. We were just down on the hitouts, and I guess that's to be expected with Sam Jacobs, because he is a good player. Clearances, we leveled that up. We'd actually had 19 more contested possessions in the second quarter, so we're actually ahead at halftime. We were ahead by 2 marks inside 50, but the disappointing thing was we're down by 11 tackles, and there was one point in that second quarter where they'd actually more than doubled our tackles as well, so... yeah, it was quite a disappointing effort, to be honest, in that sort of defensive.
I'd actually be interested to know how many broken tackles we had, because there were a lot.
Yeah.
There are a lot of moments that I can remember where we laid a tackle and they just broke through it. So it wasn't that there was no intent to lay it; we just didn't stick them. And
there was a lot of talk about the slipperiness of the ball and the dew and all that sort of thing. But from the game on TV, they said it was quite dry, it was humid, if anything, so it wasn't like wet, there was no rain or anything like that. But I think our pressure in general was really poor, because if you look at the tackles at 3/4 time, Adelaide are up by almost 3 goals, or about 3 goals. No, they're up by 20 points or so. They still have 15 more tackles at 3/4 time. And I think that's really indicative of the lack of work that our midfield, or just our team in general, put in. And probably nearly half of our tackles at one point were inside the forward 50, which is great forward half pressure, but it means there was almost no pressure on anywhere else in the field.
No, and the midfield pressure was noticeably worse. Well, in the first quarter, I guess it was non-existent, but it really died down heading into the beginning of the fourth quarter as well. And you're right, like we had a large amount of forward half tackles, which is always a good thing, but mate, none of them were converted to scores, or very few of them were converted to scoring shots.
Yeah, and look, if you look at the ruck battle, we had, in our preview podcast, I had Sinclair and Jacobs. Sinclair's got to win that, obviously, to sort of give the midfield the best opportunity. I also had, in the match preview, I had Malikan as, the big game 4, because he's playing against either Walker or Jenkins. If we have a look at some of those matchups, we ended up seeing Aaliyah move to Jenkins, and Malikan played on Walker. Now, I won't say Walker had a great game, but he was pretty good.
Do you think Malikan went to Walker, or do you think that the Crows made a plan to isolate Malikan?
Oh, definitely to isolate him, but I think the players got swapped, though, because Rampy was playing on Betts. And I was
He
a bit
was.
surprised by that, to be honest. I didn't think he should be. I mean, Betts didn't have much impact, but even then the ball didn't really go near him. So it's going to be hard for him to have any impact. But Aaliyah was really good on Jenkins. He nullified him in the forward line. Every time it went near him, he just smothered him completely.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I had a mate send me a message halfway through the game saying Aaliyah's got arms like an octopus. And I thought, damn straight he does. He's all over the place. I mean, if you look at the difference between the way Aaliyah and Melican play, though, even though they were both on Jenkins at various points in the game, Melican reacts to the player's movement, whereas Aaliyah reacts to the flight of the ball. And it usually means that Aaliyah is on top of the opposing player when the ball comes in and he can effect a spoil. Melican ends up several metres behind. He's not watching the ball, he's watching the player. So he's always second to react.
Yeah, and that's something I put in the ratings as well, that I said he's either under the ball far too frequently or he's in the middle of nowhere. He's like nowhere near his opponent. And there's been times in the first 2 rounds of football where he's been led to the ball, comfortably led to the ball. He's not a particularly quick player like Heath Grundy, so he has to really work on the positioning and the early body work to really affect the forwards' run at the ball. It just seems like maybe he doesn't have that knowledge or experience yet, or maybe he's just not particularly adept at that.
It's probably a combination of all of it. And I don't want to make Melican into sort of the whipping boy at the moment because, I mean, our problems start further up the field before it even gets into the back line.
Yep.
He has come in, he hasn't played for a year. I'm surprised he came into the team straight up. Actually, if Mayborn was fit, Mayborn would have been in the team before him, I think, just because it's been so long since he played. We're going to talk about a depth issue down there. Well, what do you do with him? You either play him in seniors or stick him in the twos. Is he going to get better in the twos? He's not going to see any power forwards in the NEAFL. I don't know what you do with him.
Yeah, I don't know either. We're in this damned if we do, damned if we don't situation. And that's exactly what we discussed in the preview podcast is we've got him. We're going to have to stick with him because Mayborn's injured. Our recruit to replace Mayborn is Hayden McLean, which is a forward. And that was the one thing that I also put on the talking points is defensive depth, non-existent. Melican is our tallest defender we've got at the moment that's fit. Heath Grundy, if he's fit again, he's obviously the tallest, I think. But we've got like 6 or 7 forwards that we can go to. Only Franklin and Reed are they're the only experienced ones. The rest are like rookies or they've only got a handful of games between them.
Yeah, and you'd have to wonder why we went and grabbed this young fella. Sorry, I've already forgotten his name. From Adelaide, Hayden McLean from Adelaide. The only way that makes sense to me is if they're going to rotate Heaney through the back line like they did during those patches from last year. But other than that...
Man, that's Robin, Peter, Paul, and everyone else to pay the devil, really. Just rob everyone on earth if you're going to put Heaney in the back line.
Why are we paying the devil? I don't want to give anything to Eddie Maguire.
Well, obviously, because if we're going to play Heaney in the back line, you might as well just hand in your chips and turn in for the night.
Oh, no, I agree, but I just can't see why we've stacked up on forwards this way. Unless the idea was to release someone to go down back, and he's the only one that I can think who can do the job. Yeah,
it's a weird situation, it really is. But look, we don't know, and that's why we put a question out to our listeners for this week's podcast, this week's SwansCast, and the question for our listeners was, what changes would you make ahead of our round 3 clash against Carlton? So we got back quite a few responses, and a lot of them are quite similar. So Dean from Facebook, his response was, Thurlow in, Clark out. We need leg speed. Give some kids a go. Foot is quick as... Put him in. I think he's talking about Zach Foot, obviously not the Foot that we released. Malikan done stuff all as well. Go back into the twos. Pretty good there.
Yeah, it's got a point. I do like the Thurlow for Clark thing. But like we just said, Melican, I mean, he's a work in progress. I just don't think he's going to see the kind of forwards he needs to see in the twos. So we're going to have to stick with him for 6, 8, 10 weeks and see where he goes, I think.
Well, I think with Carlton coming up this week, Curno's in doubt. I think even with Curno in, I would still, personally, make the change to bring Thurlow in for Malikan, and I would try and look at one of the recruits for Clark. So you've got McInerney, who's quite exciting. You've got Rowbottom as well, who's got some excitement, and you've got a couple of other players waiting in the wings who can come in. Michelle from Twitter, she just said drop Clark. Probably can't argue with that. John from Facebook said Blakey for McCartan, Jack for Clark, Dawson or Thurlow for Cunningham. So he's going to keep Malikan, obviously.
Cunningham?
He wants Cunningham out. Now, Brutus from Facebook, The biggest change has to be Mills into the midfield. 60+% of the game, Heaney 2. McCartan and Jack up forward. Thurlow replacing Mills down back. Heaney and Mills must play in the guts. Must. And that's something that we hammered home in the SwansCast Extra. We said it has to happen, and it just didn't happen. It did not happen. Ty from Facebook, Florent for Thurlow, Blakey for McCartan. Can't really argue with those. Florent is struggling at the moment. Vince from Facebook, last week's umpires. Yes, back to their state leagues, please, because they were frustrating. Frustrating is a polite way of putting it.
Let's face it.
Yeah.
Let's face it, Vince. They were garbage, mate. They were absolute garbage.
Yeah, infuriating. TV meat hand. Brian from Facebook, I'd like to see Franklin have a week off to see how our forward entry would differ as opposed to just bombing it in the air. It's a fair point. We did it last year. The Swans actually adjusted completely when we had Fox and Hayward and Ronk on the forward line. But I don't think Franklin missing the forward line is going to make a difference because we're just way too tall down there with Reed, Blakey and Franklin anyway.
Yeah, we don't. When we did that out of necessity sort of last year and the year before, especially the year before, our mids are in a much better place than they are at the moment.
Yeah.
So we're actually in a worse situation this year than we were then.
Agreed. Now, this is Rowan from Facebook. He said, Horse said Blakey could play on a wing. So if McCartan comes in, I can see Blakey on the wing and Clark out. But who knows? What do you think about that one?
I don't think anyone knows. Look, I mean, what's the upside to McCartan over Blakey? I mean, if you've seen McCartan and, versus McCartan and Blakey when they're playing in the twos, that I think Blakey's as good as McCartan already. But McCartan does have the experience underneath him, and he probably runs a leading pattern a little bit better than Blakey does at the moment. So, I don't know. I think it's much in the muchness at the moment.
Well, I think it's a fair point, and to be honest, I will probably make the change. There was a lot of promise and excitement with Blakey coming in, and he barely played any NEFL. That was probably the one thing I was disappointed about last year was he only played one NEAFL game. He should have been playing in the NEAFL for most of the season, especially when fit to really get experience against good defenders. Or at least,
of course, the
defenders nearer the AFL level. He was playing the academy leagues in the under-18s. They're not AFL level defenders.
Having said that, going to the twos and shredding the opposition for a few weeks on end would probably do wonders for someone's confidence as well. So there is that angle as well. I'm not fussed either way at the moment. I like Tommy and I like Blakey. So
look, he took that superb contested mark. So there is that. I mean, he can play. He can definitely play. He can take a mark. He's a capable footballer. It's just I think he's too raw at the moment.
No.
So,
and he's actually a little bit. He looks like a weedy kid. He's got a big head and a massive neck, but the rest of him sort of skin and bone. And McCartan looked undersized last year, but Blakey looks even worse at the moment. So at least with McCartan, you get a bigger body.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right. You're right what you said before. He's got more experience. I think that's the difference. He's got a season under his belt. He's got 2 pre-seasons. Blakey's got half a pre-season and a couple of games. So there's a big difference. And look, Ash from Facebook, his touches on your champion. He said, Birch or Hawthorn? Seriously, they sack all the humps who don't know the rules and they're working to a whistle quota. Can't disagree with that one. Now, Stephen Chalor, he is an occasional guest that we have. He had a bit of a rant, but he said, our problem really isn't the personnel. Mills and Heaney are desperately needed in our one-track midfield, but, who's knocking down the door at the moment? There's no NEAFL games. We've had one practice game where it was Ronk, McVeigh, and McCartan. I think they had a second practice one. But, Kieran Jack, he's not our answer. Who comes in for Ryan Clark? We've got no one really there. Thurlow could and probably deserves a shot. Malikan is the obvious choice to go with Charlie Curnow, under doubt. But, is McCartan worth bringing in, and should we bring him in for Blakey? And what happens with Blakey's development? So they're all really valid points, I think.
I'm actually not opposed to the idea of getting Jack in. I don't think Jack's going to be a long-term solution. In fact, I don't think he's even going to be a short-term solution because I wouldn't be surprised if he's only got this and maybe next season left him in anyway. And even though his disposal by foot's average, and it always has been, that's nothing new. At least you can count on him to be hard, though.
Yeah.
You can count on him to tackle, and that's something we need desperately at the moment.
And it just makes you wonder whether or not Ryan Clark has been brought into the side to play that role. Because at the moment, I don't know what role he's playing.
Well, he looks worse than he ever did at. I was actually a big fan of the Clark trade purely because we gave up very little. It was like a prospective buy.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work out, we lose very little. But he looks so much. And he was okay, but he wasn't great at North. But he looks so much worse with us. So I don't know how much of it's, is it nerves? Is it he doesn't get our system? Is it that we don't actually have a system and that's what he's struggling with? I don't know. But he's showing his juniorness to the team at the moment.
He is, and he was okay in the first game, but the second game, he just couldn't get into the game at all. And even when he got the ball, he just wasn't using it. It's interesting because there is talent there. It's just how do we extract it, and what role is he playing, or should he be playing? Because I don't know what role he's playing. Is he playing wing? Is he playing midfield? Is he playing flank? It's like Hewitt. Hewitt was just popping up everywhere on the field, and we didn't know what position he was actually playing in.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what Hewitt or Clark's role was on this weekend. I don't know. I don't know, and I don't know whether they were trying something different or they were reacting to something that was out there. It was very difficult. Normally, when you watch a game, you can sort of go, "Oh, well, the reason this player's there is because so and so struggling with that, and they swapped it around, and this is the matchup that you want. That would be better in the back line." But this weekend gone, I couldn't follow. I couldn't follow what was going on, and I'm not assuming that Grandmaster Horse doesn't know what he's doing, but obviously what he planned, and you could see every time the camera went on to him and you got his face on the big screen at the SCG, and he was so frustrated in the coach's box. So whatever he intended and whatever actually occurred were two different things. But I don't know. I don't know what Clark's role was, and I don't know what Hewitt's role was.
Well, he came out at quarter time and he just looked perplexed. He didn't know what was going on. He had the expression on his face where he just looked like he didn't know what he would have to do to get the players to perform at the level that he needs them to perform at. And I just wonder if there's just a lot of confusion about the game plan, because last year they made concerted efforts to change the way they played, and it looked like it might work. But this season, I have absolutely no idea what game style they're playing. It is not clear, and they're turning the ball over so often that they don't have possession long enough to really establish any kind of control on the game.
No. Probably the best we can do at the moment is take Horse on his word. So in his post-game stuff, he sort of pointed to the second quarter and said that's what we were trying to achieve, is what we did there. But we're inconsistent from quarter to quarter, and
but lack the polish as well. Yeah,
lack polish. So if the second quarter is what we're heading for, then I'm cool with that, and I'm cool to have a couple of muddling years. But if we're only going to do it for a quarter of a game, it's going to be hard to watch.
And it takes a quarter of a game for us to actually get into the game as well. And we're not just talking a slow quarter, but an almost scoreless quarter.
Yep.
It's a challenge. Watching the Swans at the moment is more of a challenge than it's ever been. And we've never been a particularly pretty side to watch. But there's one thing you could always guarantee from the Swans every single week you watched them, was that they gave their all and they busted in every single day and every single game. But now it's just...
Our talent was always... We're not as talented as you. We're not as good. We can't kick as well. But we are harder than every team out there. So just take us on, and we'll just kill you with persistence. And we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah,
and we don't
exactly.
have the talent. We don't have the raw talent to get around it either.
No, and you go back to 2005, 2006. I mean, that lineup was talent on every single line of the ground. There was only very few inexperienced players. 2012, there was a handful of inexperienced players, but the core of the side was a very experienced side, but there really weren't that many people who didn't play that often. Lewis Jetta was still newish, but he'd been in the system for 2 years. Mitch Morton, he'd been in the system for years, but only played a handful of games. But our best players that day, Josh Kennedy, I don't think he played less than 100 games, but his potential was well known before that point anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, not a great result. We didn't want to harp on too much about the negative stuff. We probably dwelled on a little bit more than really what I wanted to. But we do have the Carlton game to look forward to, and we are hoping that it is not going to be a 0-3 start, because history says 0-3, we are the only team in AFL history to make the finals from 0-3, or certainly from the last couple of decades anyway, from 0-3, certainly in the new AFL era. And if we do lose to Carlton, that is going to be one very, very depressing moment. So, Josh, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much. Always enjoy being here.
And as always, guys, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram with the tag The Swans Blog. You can always get in touch with us during the week with the hashtags SwansCast and SwansCast Extra. Make sure you get involved with our fans' Player of the Year. We put them up every weekend, and our player ratings. Get your votes in. You want your voice to be heard? Get them in. Until next time, Josh, go Swans.
Up the Swannies.